exact report, but in all seriousness, we're thankful you're good and you're back with us today. We're going to continue our study in the book of Judges. We wrapped up chapter 15 last week, so we are in chapter 16. And again, as we wrapped up chapter 15 last week, we read verses 9 through the end of the chapter in verse 20, and we saw where Samson killed the 1,000 men with the jawbone. And as he killed them, the Lord, he was parched, seemed very thirsty. He talked about his spirit came back to him, so he was quite thirsty. And the Lord provided water out of a jawbone. And sadly, Samson, still, though full of himself, named that place after the caller, not after the one he called upon. And we kind of get a sense of where Samson is spiritually, fleshly, where again we talked a lot about Samson loves Samson. And often, if we want to be honest with ourselves, we often love ourselves a whole lot more than we love God. And we look here in verse 16 or chapter 16, we sadly see the end of Samson's life. We'll read the chapter in entirety and we'll get to where we were. I thought we'd get a lot further, but as I was studying, the Lord just really opened up my eyes a lot in verses 1 through 3. So we'll just see where the Lord takes us today, but we'll read the whole chapter. And again, I know it's something we're probably all well aware of, we've learned about, but I think it's good to go through and really read it, take our time looking through each verse, each word. It's there for a reason, and really dwelling upon it and see what we can learn from it. So Judges chapter 16, verse 1 says, Then went Samson to Gaza, and saw there a harlot, and went in unto her. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is come hither. And they compassed him in, and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, In the morning, when it is day, we shall kill him. And Samson lay till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city, and the 2 posts, and went away with them, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of a hill that is before Hebron. And it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So this is a different woman than in verse 1. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and said unto her, Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver. And Delilah said to Samson, Tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. And Samson said unto her, If they bind me with 7 green whips that were never dried, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green whips which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the whips as a thread of tow is broken when it toucheth the fire. So his strength was not known. And Delilah said unto Samson, Behold, thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, If thou bind me fast with new ropes that were never occupied, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. Delilah therefore took new ropes, and bound him therewith, and said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liers in wait, abiding in the chamber. And he brake them from off his arms like a thread. And Delilah said unto Samson, Hitherto thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, If thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web. And she fastened it with the pin, and said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awakened out of his sleep, and went away with the pin of the beam, and with the web. And she said unto him, How canst thou say, I love thee, when thine heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death, sounds awful familiar, that he told her all his heart, and said unto her, There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man. And when Delilah saw that he hath told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, Come up this once, for he hath showed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and brought money into their hand. And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times before, and shake myself. And this is probably one of the scariest verses in the whole Bible to me. And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. Verse 21, But the Philistines took him, and put out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. Howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. We'll pause there, but we see grace from the Lord there. The Lord allowed his hair to grow back. Some he doesn't. But we do see grace, that even in Samson's great folly, the Lord was gracious to Samson, and his hair grew back. I never had seen that grace there before, but his hair grew again. Verse 23, Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together for to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon, their God, and to rejoice. For they said, Our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God. For they said, Our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. And it came to pass, when their hearts were merry, that they said, Call for Samson, that he may make us sport. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport. And they sat him between the pillars. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, Suffer me, that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me. I pray thee, and strengthen me. I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. His prayer is awful different there than it was when he prayed when he was parched for water. Verse 29, And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one with his right hand, and of the other with his left. And Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Then his brethren and all the house of his fathers came down, and took him, and brought him up, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, in the burying place of Manoah his father, and he judged Israel 20 years. Before we continue on, Brother Tyler Rouse, will you lead us in a word of prayer, please? Amen. So if we turn back to the beginning of the chapter, I know it was a long read, but I just think it was very important for us to read. We were in church Wednesday night, and the man that gave the lesson there, he talked about how often we just overread so much in the Bible. We skim through, we try to get to the good part or the meat of the message, but there's so much in every verse. Like I think Brother Gordon talks about studying out each word and being blessed from it and really understanding the verse. And I read that, and as I read it, what a fall in 3 chapters. From chapter 13, where Samson's birth is promised. He's going to be a man that's going to serve the Lord. His parents are so dedicated at the time and eager to raise him up as he should. And then in verse 16, we see that he dies with his enemies. He dies with the ones that he was come to raise an occasion against because he had mingled with them for far too long. What a heartbreaking chapter it is to see where sin can lead you. But we turn back to our text and the first 3 verses. I want to look at those first. We see here that chapter 16 starts off a lot like chapter 14. 14 did, with Samson going somewhere he shouldn't have been. Again, outside the sovereign will of God. I'm not taking away from that. But Samson being somewhere he shouldn't have been. In 14 it was Timnath. Now here in Gaza. In seeing something that he shouldn't have been looking at. Right? In 14 he was looking at this Philistine woman. And what did he talk about her? Was she spiritual? Was she a good mother? Was she a good wife? Was she a good sister? No, she was pretty. And in verse 1 of chapter 16, we see that Samson is in Gaza, which is the farthest city, I believe, from Samson's hometown, and he is looking upon a harlot. And we see he does not even have a desire to marry this one. He just wants to come into her chamber. Both chapters he commits sin, which cost him greatly. Samson has gone up to Gaza again, which is the furthest Philistine city from his home. And if you read some scholars, they talk about that this distance seems to depict the distance Samson has gone away from the Lord, just like he has gone away from home. He is so far from God that, again, we read in, I believe it's there in verse 20, that when Samson gets up, when his hair is cut, he doesn't even realize the strength of God has gone from him. How scary is that? We all can fall into that. That's why it's scary. That's why it's sad, because I can picture myself right there. Brother Clark, I believe, prayed last Sunday how he relates to Samson. How scary it is that we relate so much to Samson. We let so many things beset us. Whether Samson's pet sin was the lust, especially of his eyes, the ladies. We all have sin that just often besets us, probably because we let it. Because oftentimes we go and look for it. But Samson was so far from the Lord, and it depicts in his distance from home. And you know what? As I've gotten older, I realize how important it is to be home. Whether it's at your home with the 4 walls you live in with your spouse and your children, or the home where the Lord has placed you in your home church. It's important to be there. Because if not, you get out in this world too long, you're going to be just like Samson, looking at that sin, looking at it, rubbing elbows with it, and eventually it can cost you your life. So Samson sees this harlot in verse 1, and this time he doesn't want to marry her, yet he only desires to act out the lustful thoughts he has when he sees her. It is important, as our pastor covered, and a big reason why we sing that little Sunday school song this morning, that we ought to keep our thoughts pure. We have to keep our thoughts in subjection. It is so easy to let your thoughts go, and you think, well, no one knows them. Well, God does. And if you don't keep your thoughts in check, they eventually turn into actions. And we see that here with Samson. But it is so important that we keep our thoughts pure. We are pointing towards a pure life. I've just been really chewing on that, thinking about, man, what I'm doing trying to point towards a pure life? And I'm ashamed to say I don't always think about it, but I try to think, is this pointing me towards a pure life? Is me watching this a pure life? Is me listening to this a pure life? Is my thought of this pointing me towards a pure life? And sadly, it doesn't look like Samson had any thought of that. As our pastor mentioned as well, how often do we fail to think, I am taking the Holy Ghost wherever you go? Samson was ordained to be a servant of the Lord, right? He was a Nazarite. He was set apart for service of the Lord. He was taking the Lord into the chamber of that harlot. That's what he did. Do we think that? Do we think that Samson thought he was taking the Lord in the Lord's temple? Because if you're saved here today, the Holy Spirit dwells within you. The Bible talks about this as a temple of the Lord. Do we think about where we take the temple of the Lord? Did Samson think that he was taking the temple of the Lord into the bed of a harlot? I have to believe that he did not. Because if so, how could he commit this sin? And that could be said of all of us in the sin we commit. I know it could be said of me. How better off would we be if we would just consider where we take the Holy Ghost in our personal life? What do we allow him to be around? What are we putting on display before God? Because as we've mentioned over and over, and we've been raised, if you've been raised in church, and if you haven't been, as long as you've been a member of this church, you've been taught that God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. So how often are we thinking about what are we putting before the Lord in our thoughts, in our speech, in our actions, in our motives? Because God sees it all. I believe that thought, I know, would help me when we encounter temptation to restrain from the sin of our flesh. I am taking the Lord here. That should make you shudder if you truly respect. But I can't remember quoted exactly, but Brother Austin had that message a few weeks, maybe months ago, about fear leads to reverence. If we feared the Lord like we should, then we would think of that and have reverence that the Lord should not be here. Like, we should not take the Lord openly, willingly to this sin. Yes, he's in hell and he is everywhere. He sees all things going, but we should not be the vessel that takes him there. Sadly, this sin that Samson commits, and all of our sin, because sin truly should break your heart. Whether it's your sin, your brother or sister's Christ sin, the world's sin, it should truly break your heart. We often get that hard shell, look down your nose and think, whoa, look what they did. But how often does it truly break our heart? You know why it doesn't? Because we think we won't fall to it too. Or we think we've tricked somebody, or we think we're better than somebody, or we think we won't be there, or we've hidden enough, and we fail to forget that that could be me. And it probably has been, and if it hasn't been, it will be. That's why God came for a Savior. He's trying to witness to Leo, telling him, it's okay to cry out to the Lord and visibly cry. God didn't come for the strong. He didn't come for the whole. He came for the broken. And I'm not saying you have to cry to be saved, but it's okay to be broken. We are all broken, mended together by God's grace, but we may never forget that this sin should truly break our hearts, because we should look at ourselves and say, boy, that's me. That's me. But Samson here sadly commits a sin and he lays with the harlot. While he's indulging in the sin of the flesh, what is going on? That he does not even pay attention to. But what's going on right now in verse 2? His enemies are plotting his death. And he can't even see it. How many of you would go home right now with the family you love and walk into your home if you knew your enemies and they were planning your death? I'm ready to go to heaven. I'm not afraid to die, but I'd be lying to you if I said I wanted to die today. I'm enjoying the life the Lord's put me in for the time being. I would not willingly walk into my death. The Bible talks about not tempting the Lord, right? We, in the Wednesday night message, that was talking about the temptations that Jesus went through, about Satan saying, throw yourself down off this hill and the angels will come. We're not supposed to tempt the Lord. But how many of you would walk into your home or walk into your car if you knew that, hey, if you start your car today and drive home, you're going to get in a wreck and die? I would hopefully none of us would. But as Samson lays in the pig slop of his sin, his enemies are moving about ready to kill him when he wakes in the morning. Again, as it just asks, is he aware of this? No. Because the only thing that Samson here is focused on is his own desires and his own lust. That's all Samson cares about. Doesn't care about the Lord, doesn't care about Israel, doesn't care about his testimony, doesn't care about anything other than himself. And again, if we are honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with myself, because again, if whatever I say, I have to say to myself first, how often am I just consumed with what does Matt want? We rarely count the cost of sin. And again, I know Brother Austin's talked a lot about this, but I felt led to talk about it again. We rarely count the cost of sin when we begin to partake of it. We only think of the pleasure that will come and not the cost that needs to be paid. How better off would we be that we would think of ourselves surrounded, waylaid, and marked for ruin by our spiritual enemies when sin and temptation comes into our life? How better would we be that if we partake in this sin, that our enemies are right outside there, ready to watch us die? Our enemies are right outside waiting for us to just take a little bit of that temptation and watch us perish. That we would rather indulge in, whether it's your drunkenness, your uncleanness, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, lust of light, whatever it may be. How better off will we think, boy, if I go shake that hand of that sin, my enemies are out here laughing ready. When we engage in that, our flesh sensual appetite of whatever sin it is, how better will we be to think, boy, if I start doing this, my enemies are out there ready to kill me. As opposed to, no one will know. No one will find out. I'll just dabble. What does Proverbs say? You can't have the coals in your bosom and not be burned. It makes you think a lot about, when I was reading this and just thinking about that analogy, and now it wasn't my own that come up with it. Matthew Henry talked a lot about it, and I thought it was really, it really challenged me in my way of thinking. But I thought a lot about when Brother Derek set up that trap in his yard to kill, or to catch that thing that was killing his ducks. And he sets that trap up, and that animal is so easily led to their capture by food. Something that is a lust of that flesh. They are thinking about food. They're thinking about, I need to eat. Not thinking about, why is it just right here? Why is it open and willing? I've never seen this before. Why is it surrounded by stuff that looks kind of weird? I just think, ooh, food. And animals so easily are caught by a simple trap. A few leaves, maybe a little bit of a brush, a piece of a cheeseburger, and they're caught. And what do we think? Stupid animal. You're so easily caught. The animal never counted the cost. And again, animals do not have souls. Don't believe animals go to heaven. Just to put that out there. But that animal never counts the cost of what this little free food or this little pleasure is going to cost them. They never sit there and think about, is this good for me? They just say, ooh, food. Boom. Yeah, my dog does it all the time. Dumb dog walks in the middle of the street, 307. Doesn't think about when he wants to go see his neighbor. Hey, if I walk in the street, I could get hit by a car. But we think of it, stupid animal. They don't ever think, does the food seem to be too good to be true? Why would it just be sitting there? They give no thought and easily fall into the trap. And in the case of the animal that Derek caught, it ended up costing that animal's life. And many of them do. Brother Tyler Clark's another one. He catches animals all the time. He's trapped them. I remember when we first started coming here, he would trap animals out there by Dirksen all the time. How often are we stupid animals? We just march right into the trap and partake, not at all ever counting the cost. Not seeing where as being surrounded by our enemy, hoping that we fall into the trap. I can imagine Clark was, I imagine Derek was just waiting, hoping. Come on, go take the bait. Go take it. That's what the devil's doing to you. Throws it out there. What did he do about, you might know what he did about with Job. Lord, please, he's just good to you because you're good to him. Let me do something to him. Okay, but you can't touch his life. So he throws that trap out there, he causes the house to fall, all his loved ones to be died. I believe the devil's like, curse him. Curse him. Do it. Wait. Curse him. We got you surrounded. We're ready to watch you fall. That's the same thing the devil does to you and I. When that little pet sin comes up that feels good, just cast out there in front of you, take it. Take it. Samson probably thought his lust in verse 1 would only affect him and that woman. There was a whole country ready to kill him. And he couldn't see it. Because Samson loved Samson. We love ourselves. We love our flesh and the desires of it. We often just march into that trap, never taking the cost or the count of what it will cost us. We fall into the trap so our enemy can ruin our life, ruin our testimony for the Lord. And oftentimes we're just like that simple animal, that stupid animal. We just walk in, get caught, see our friends get caught, and walk in ourselves. If you only walk and talk after the flesh, we are just like those dumb animals, easily falling for simple traps. But if we stay focused on the Lord, stay in His Word, seek to please Him, which you can only do by knowing His Word, praying to Him, being around our brothers and sisters in Christ, being open with our sin, open with our things we struggle with, asking the Lord to help us, we can avoid the pitfalls of sin in our flesh. Turn to 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. Dearly beloved, I beseech you, as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lust, which war against the soul. There's a spiritual warfare out there. I know we know it. But how often do we think when that sin is out there to tempt us that our enemies are watching around about, hoping you take it, so they can wait for you to wake up and kill you? Ruin your life. That's what sin will do. These Philistines somehow found out that Samson was there. Made me kind of wonder, just like thoughts I put out there, not really necessarily looking for answers, but just questions. Did Samson come to Gaza not even hiding his identity? Not being afraid of the Philistines because of his strength, but also not being ashamed that he was in Gaza? It doesn't sound like he was there in any other business other than to just look. Do you see that while he was on business, he was looking? While he was here witnessing, he was looking. He just says he went to Gaza and looked, saw a harlot. Did this woman, this harlot, or someone else at the inn of the house, did they leak out that Samson was here? Again, Samson gives no thought of what could happen as he comes into this harlot, comes into Gaza. As he partakes in this sin, his enemies plan to kill him. And again, I pray to all of us, and especially myself, that this would be a warning sign to me that when sin and temptation is out there, it is only the devil planning how he can destroy my life. There is no good that can come from it. He wants to destroy my life, my family, the church I attend, my testimony. He wants it all. Is it worth it? I can tell you it's not. In verse 3, though, we see the incredible strength of Samson. It says there that he awakes at midnight. He lays till midnight and he awakes. Maybe the weight of his sin, finally, he was woken up to. Maybe he was woken up and realized he needed to get going. Maybe he finally woke up out of that slumber, I don't know. But he woke up at midnight, as the Bible says, and he goes to the gates of the city. And remember, just in the previous verse, verse 2, his enemies are there. I believe they're there waiting for him to overtake him and kill him, as the Bible clearly states. But he came to the gate, though, with no occasion. Did the men fall asleep? They said they were quiet till morning, so maybe did they take a break and wait? They were going to wake up at dusk or dawn to kill him? Again, I find that very odd. Did the Lord just protect Samson and hide him? I don't know. Jesus asked the disciples just to watch out while they to pray with him in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they fell asleep. They slumbered. They couldn't even stay up who knows how long. So we're fickle people. But these men, I would assume, were asleep, or Samson somehow was hidden, because there was no occasion. I believe if Samson came and the men saw him, there would have been some all-out war there, but there was not. But Samson picks up these gates. He picks up the posts, the gates, and all the bars thereof, and puts them on his back. Dude's doing a squat, and then he all of a sudden just picks them up. And some of the support text I get says it was roughly about a 40-mile walk. He took these things on his back and walked up to the top of a hill, not only flat, but to the top of a hill, and puts these gates on a city or a hill that overlooks the city Hebron. That's some serious strength. When I was playing football, we had to run up this real long, not a super steep incline hill, but it was this long, just steady incline, and that thing was torture. And that was when I was in the best shape of my life, let alone having the weight of brass, iron, post, rock probably, just on your shoulders walking up. And again, he does it in such a manner that the Philistines stay asleep. So I would assume he's probably not grunting and moaning. Probably just little. Because again, these men are there ready. Probably not sleeping too much if you know the next day you're waking up going to try to kill the man that's killed at least 1,000 of your brethren. But if you stop and think here, it's wild to see the strength of Samson. The strength that he possesses, obviously, from the Lord. He possesses over the Philistines. over a lion, a city gate. But Samson has no strength to keep the lust of his flesh in check. Maybe it's because he doesn't want to. Obviously, we know in verse 4 that the Lord let everything transpire to raise an occasion against the Philistines. I'm not taking away from the sovereign will of God. But if we just look at this as a man, another sinner, he had all the strength over all these things, all the smarts, all the ability, but he couldn't keep that lust of his flesh in check. Again, we see the strength of Samson here is no match for his desire of lust, love, company of a woman that we see later on in this chapter. How often and easily it besets him. Verses 4 and 5, we'll read this again just because it's been a little while. And it came to pass afterward, so after this has happened, that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and said unto her, Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we may give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver. As we know, Samson's weakness is women. This desire for company, this desire for lust, whatever it may be, but his desire for a relation with a woman was just his weakness. In verse 14, he saw the woman in Timnath and wanted her for a wife, strictly because of how she looked. Earlier in this chapter, he sees a harlot and he wants to go in unto her and come into her chamber. And he does. And now again we see another woman, this woman in the valley of Sorek named Delilah. Her name meaning long hair hanging down, but I believe from what I read, it's also very similar to the Hebrew word which means night. And if we notice here in verse 4, this is the first time, though, that anything is mentioned of Samson's love. First, in chapter 14, it's mentioned that she was fair and Samson wanted to marry her. It doesn't say Samson loved her. With the harlot, it just says that he saw her and he wanted to go in unto her. Here, though, we see that Samson loves somebody. Now, is it love or lust? But his heart is for Delilah, this woman. It's not explicitly stated in the text that Delilah was a Philistine or an Israelite woman. Many believe that they're 99% sure she was a Philistine. I tend to believe so too, but the Bible doesn't explicitly say it. Whether or not she was, her heart was for the world, for the Philistines. We see that she was from the valley of Sorek, which means red grape. It is a valley on the western side of Palestine that runs near Jerusalem toward the Mediterranean Sea. During the book of Judges, Bethshemesh guarded the eastern end, but the Philistines controlled the western portion. But as we see here in verses 4 through 5, it was made known that Samson loved Delilah, to where the lords of the Philistines came to her and sought for her to entice or deceive Samson, to let him make her aware of the source of his strength, that they may prevail against him. They may bind him to afflict him. And what do they offer in return for her services? Money. So we see here that says, verse 5, and the lords of the Philistines. If you turn to 1 Samuel chapter 6, I believe there are 5 lords here. And I believe text will support it here, but I just want to show you where I get that from, or where the Bible states that, not anything about me. But 1 Samuel chapter 6, verse 17, and these are the golden emerods which the Philistines returned for a trespass offering unto the Lord. For Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, one for Gath, and one for Ekron, one. And the golden mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines, belonging to the 5 lords, both of fenced cities and of country villages, even unto the great stone of Abel, whereon they sat down the ark of the Lord, which stone remaineth unto this day in the field of Joshua the Bethshemite. So I believe there are 5 lords of Philistines here that come and try to entice her with this money. They want her because they are aware somehow that he loves this woman. And again, we talk so much about being careful who you love, who you trust, because we see people will often try to manipulate and play on care, love. What is the best way that you can usually get someone to reveal the information? I have your family. I have those you love. So they offered her, if there's 5 lords, which I believe there are, so we'll just go off that presumption. So in essence, they offered her 5,500 pieces of silver to deliver Samson's source of strength, that they may bind him up and afflict him. Just as Jesus was betrayed for the lust of money, so was Samson. Helps us see why, and we won't turn there, I have it written down, but 1 Timothy 6 verse 10 tells us, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." Money is not evil. Money is a necessary tool for the world to go around. We all have mortgages to pay, bills to pay. We all work for an income. But when that love of money is more than content in what the Lord has given you, when that love, that covetousness of money, it led to Samson's death, or Samson's getting bound up. It leads to Jesus being betrayed from the lust of money by Judas. That lust of money, as 1 Timothy 6:10 says, is something we need to be very careful of. Again, money is a necessary tool for the world, but it should be something that we love or long for. It should be something that we're thankful for, we use to the best ability that God has given us, and we try not to err from the faith. But to help us understand really how much 5,500 pieces of silver was back in this time, if you look at Exodus chapter 21, Exodus chapter 21, if you start in verse 28, it's talk about laws regarding oxen. But if we really look at verse 32, I want to get to this one. I think this will kind of help us get a gauge of how much money this really is. So in verse 32 it says, "If the ox shall push a manservant or a maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned." So if an ox were to kill a servant of yours or a servant of someone else, if you had the ox and another person's servant came and was helping you, whatever it may be, and that ox killed that person, it would cost the ox their life, and you would have to give 30 pieces of silver for that body, for that person. So a common servant in this time was cost you 30 pieces of silver. So 5,500 pieces of silver would be the equivalent of 183.3 repeating servants. It's a lot of money in that time. And again, what do they hold over Samson? His love for a woman he shouldn't love. And what do they hold over this woman? Her lust of the money. I believe from what we read later on that Delilah knew Samson loved her. It says there in verse 4, "And it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman named Delilah." So whether he told her I love her, whether her actions showed it, but I believe that she could tell or her that Samson truly loved her or had such strong feelings for her. And to be honest, as we read the whole chapter, it doesn't sound like those feelings were reciprocated. And in verse 6, "And Delilah said unto Samson, Tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee." Again, the Bible includes everything we need to know. It doesn't seem like she had to weigh her options too much. It doesn't seem like she battled too much with, man, do I really give up this guy that loves me? It was told, hey, if you give us his source of his strength, 5,500 pieces of silver, right to you. Hey, Samson, where's your strength come from? As we read in verse 6, we see that Delilah was loyal to money, the Philistines, herself, over Samson. Again, we talk so much about it's important who you marry. We talk so much about strange women, not raising them and teaching our boys not to go after them. This is a strange woman. Samson likes strange women, and it cost him over and over and over. Again, in verse 6, we see that Delilah begins to entice Samson to tell the source of his strength in order to fulfill great gain for herself. Delilah is the definition of a strange woman. Hard not to think that Solomon, as he was giving instructions or advice to his sons in Proverbs, wasn't thinking of the account of Samson. Turn here real quickly. If you look at Proverbs chapter 6, I know we've covered these not too long ago, but it doesn't hurt at all to just be reminded of them. If we were reminded of them more often, you might see our churches and our country in a better spot. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 20. "My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thy heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee, and when thou awakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light, and reproofs of instructions are the ways of life, to keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. For by means of a whorish woman a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Turn to chapter 7, verse 21, just a page or two over maybe. Chapter 7, verse 21, again, talking about the ways of a harlot. With her much fair speech she caused him to yield, with the flattering of her lips she forced him. He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hateth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. Hearken unto me now thereof, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways, go not astray in her paths. For she has cast down many wounded, yet many strong men have been slain by her. It's hard not to think that Solomon wasn't thinking about Samson as he gave that advice. If that kind of advice would be given now today, how much better would our country, our marriages, our church be in? We see the cost of mingling with a strange woman. Again, as our pastor mentioned, may we teach our sons to avoid these strange women. May we raise our daughters not to be them. Why do we not consider these verses for entangling ourselves in sins? Why did not Samson? He knew. Even though that Proverbs came after Samson, this was not new. Proverbs was not new information. Deuteronomy, the book of the Moses, talks all about adultery. Talks about the sin against the Lord, forgetting the Lord. And again, all this isn't adultery per se, but he is going after a strange woman. It talks about going after strange women. It talks about this lust of the flesh and how it'll cost you. The Bible talks about, in Deuteronomy we read before, I believe in chapter 9, about what happens if we forget the Lord. And Samson did. Again, this is what rubbing elbows with the devil does. This is what taking part of the lust of the flesh will get you. We'll close here, but we see the kind of woman Samson's gone after. He's fallen in love with her strange women. These strange women are not loyal to God. They're not loyal to Samson. They're only loyal to themselves. In both cases, the woman from Timnath and Delilah here, they are quickly and easily persuaded to deceive Samson for their own gain. Sadly, as we talked about earlier, Samson is like an animal and easily falls for the simple trap from the devil. In verse 7, the first thing he says, though, that if you would bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak as another man. Those 7 green withs that were never dried, they are most likely made from animal flesh or animal intestines. That's what they are, similar to a bowstring. Never been dried, meaning they would still probably have some elasticity to them, or they were strong. They would not tear apart easily like as dried out meat does, beef jerky. If you have just a regular piece of meat there compared to a piece of beef jerky, you can tear one apart pretty easily, not the other. But you notice too there that the number of 7, which the Bible often represents perfection and completeness, almost like he used this to maybe to help sell his lie, to talk about the strength of it. But the last thing I just want to think about, did you notice that Samson never asked, why is she wanting to know this? He never said, why are you wanting to be aware of what could make me weak? Why are you wanting to be aware of what in the world, why are you asking me that? There's no discernment. Because why? He is so engulfed in a sin. I've been there. I'm ashamed to say. So engulfed in your sin that you don't even think straight. If my wife came to me and said, so if I wanted to kill you, or just hurt you real bad, what would be the easiest way? I pray to God I would think, why are you asking me that? I pray to the good Lord above I never have a wife that does that. I don't think I will because I'm very blessed with a godly wife. Again, a very important piece of who you marry and what are you raising your kids to be. But why did he never ask or pause to wonder, why do you want to know what would make me like any other man? I'm not special in my own accord, but somehow I'm special to that one. And I'm thankful that she sees that and she doesn't go, what can I do to make you just like anybody else? Lord willing, we aren't marrying someone who would be curious to know this. But still, why would you not pause and think? Because you're caught up in sin, caught up in your flesh. We are all just like Samson. And we will easily be so if we don't look at 1 Peter 2, verse 11, and abstain from that the lust of the flesh. Abstain from it. Because someone could be asking you, how can I kill you? And you'll give them the answer. Lord help. Lord help. Brother Clark, will you dismiss us in a word of prayer, please?